Before you were a VC, I know you were an investor, and in fact, or rather, you were an entrepreneur. You had a video fitness game that you launched. Right. How did creating that make you a better investor now?
Well, I think taking the chance to start a company, pursuing a vision that I was really passionate about, sort of bringing technology and fitness together for a large audience in terms of home fitness, was a great step for me, learning how that takes place and all the things you need to do to get a company off the ground. At the same time, as a first-time entrepreneur, I made a lot of mistakes, and I think the biggest thing I learned is that as an entrepreneur, you really get to make three choices. You get to choose your idea, you get to choose your investors, and you get to choose your business partners. And I think I was 1 for 3 on that, and to be successful, you have to have at least 2 out of 3.
But now, obviously, that experience is making you a better investor. And of course, when you counsel the companies that you're working on, you're able to pass this advice along.
Oh, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And so I think, for me, many of the companies that we invest in are not really similar to, we don't invest in the gaming industry per se. But I think that the empathy for the entrepreneur, understanding sort of the things you go through, the basic blocking and tackling of building a company, the things you have to do to go from 4 employees to 40 employees, and how you really establish the DNA of your company are the things that I learned and experienced, and that then I can sort of help the portfolio companies that I work with have success as they go to do that.
Phin, First Round Capital is pretty much the most active VC firm in New York this year.
Try to stay busy.
We know that Uber, Warby Parker, Birchbox, these are just a few of the companies that you have invested in. What's next?
So I think we're looking at a couple things. Certainly very busy in New York, but busy nationally. We have offices in Philadelphia, San Francisco, as well as New York City. And I think for me personally, really looking at the healthcare space as well as the hardware space has been interesting over the past couple months, and will be for the coming year.
Okay, so what's going to make the difference, Phin, quite frankly, in where you invest money and where you don't?
So in the hardware space, what we're seeing is a democratization of access to the ability to create. And I think we saw that in the web over the past decade. And when you democratize access to creation, I think there's a huge opportunity to invest in the tools and the platforms that those entrepreneurs and those creators are building on top of. And so we're looking at things in that space. So more looking at the specific tools that will support the growth of these spaces, rather than trying to choose the individual creative effort that will ultimately be successful.
And Phin, I know one of the larger themes that is probably going to go throughout all the new investments that you make is design. Why is this so important now?
So I think there's a couple things driving the importance of design. I think the biggest one is the shift to mobile. And so I think within the next couple years, I don't think we'll talk about mobile versus desktop. I think it will be just the default mechanism for accessing the web. And if you think about mobile as an experience versus desktop being a much more intimate experience, something you're touching rather than input with a mouse and a keyboard, I think design becomes much more important in a more intimate environment, something that's more driven by the end user, appreciating, being able to understand what they're doing, having an appreciation for that product, and easily being able to adopt it and integrate it into their life.
So basically, no matter what you're doing, this is just going to be a key element to any company that you decide to invest in.
I think it's true, and on not just in the consumer-facing area, but also in enterprise. You're seeing the same shift to mobile, but also you're seeing with the SaaS businesses the ability for the individual user to make a purchasing decision. So you no longer have to do a long sale to the CIO of a business and make a long argument, a financial argument, and an ROI argument. You have an individual who has an expense account able for $20 or $30 a month to access world-class software and do their job more efficiently, faster, and more easily.
Phin, one of the things that I know that First Round Capital is doing that is really making a mark is starting earlier and earlier, reaching out to entrepreneurs younger and younger, and the Dorm Room Fund is a big part of that. How is that helping you gain the upper hand when you're competing with other VCs for the next hot deal?
So I think at First Round we try to operate like a startup. We operate at startup speed, and as we have ideas and as we have innovative thoughts, we try to experiment. And so the Dorm Room Fund is an example of that. We felt like the way you start a company and the amount of money you need to start a company had dramatically changed over the last decade, and yet for college students, access to capital had not had similar change. And so while there is a big movement around people should be dropping out of school and they should be pursuing a full-time career rather than going to college, my own feeling and as I talk with my partners, we sort of felt like the people who are successful dorm room entrepreneurs, when you think about the Facebooks or the Dells or the Microsofts, these were not people who dropped out of school in order to build a business. They began building their business in college, and then when they realized that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that required 100 or 200% of their attention, they then left school to pursue that opportunity full-time. And so if we can provide, through the Dorm Room Fund, the ability for those students to push their hypothesis a little bit further, to validate a little bit more, and de-risk their business in a little more significant way with small amounts of capital, $20,000 to $30,000, that can often be the difference between someone finding that early success or potentially leaving school only to find that the business was not viable.
Yeah, which then obviously is just delaying disappointment, so to speak. And I know you just mentioned the amounts that you're putting into these companies. $20,000 has gone into the first one, if I'm not mistaken, called Firefly.
That's right.
What does that company do?
So Firefly is it allows customer service people to share a browser with their customers and to much more efficiently engage with people who are trying to access a service or buy a product on their site. And it doesn't require the user to download anything. The customer service person integrates it's integrated into the technology on the company side so that any customer can reach out to customer service and share a browser.